And we are live at 2 seconds. 2 seconds long this show is at this point. Travarsi, what's up?
Hey, B-Boy Tech, what's up?
What's going on? This is Gear, Dive, and Jam.
Oh, yeah.
B-Boy Tech. What we got going on this show?
Today we have 512. We're talking about the vector sequencer.
Vector sequencer. Love it.
Yeah. I'm super.
I wish I had it, but I don't. But this is going to be the ultimate gas show for me.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely need you need this. So I'm glad we're diving into this one tonight.
No doubt. So who we got is Jim Coker of 512, who makes the vector sequencer, and who else we got?
We have Steve Turner, and we have Dysonant.
No doubt.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hey,
All
hey.
right.
Hey, hey.
So without further ado, let's get started. Yo.
Hey, everyone.
What's happening, everybody?
How's it going?
All right, all right.
Welcome to Gear Dive Jam,
Yeah,
where we get to nerd out online and talk about things that we love and want
that's right.
or have in like
So hey, I think let's get started by. I mean, we kind of introduced everybody already, so let's talk about what is the vector sequencer, and let's get into the nuts and bolts that way. Just kind of a brief overview for those that may not know. Jim?
Well, it's a digital sequencer with analog style control format, and the centerpiece of the UI are these two large OLED displays right in the middle of the unit, and makes it easy to see what's going on. Dive around your sequences, change parts, keep track of where you're at, and it's also a multi-part sequencer. So there are 8 parts that you can use in different ways. Each sequence has a number of unique features. One thing that people in particular like is the chance operations. So on any particular step, you can say, hey, I want a 50% chance this step's going to ratchet, or this step's going to jump somewhere else, or the pitch is going to change. And that's really handy for building both, chance operations, things that are different every time around, but also you can use it in a way to do some predictable changes over time, because you can say, oh, this chance operation is at 100%, but only every third or fourth bar. So it can also be used to do things like fills. There are also external CV inputs for you can modulate the sequences as they're running. New in 2.0, we add support for a connected launch pad, which makes it really easy to navigate your project, particularly a large project with several parts when you're performing. In the video we're going to show, I use it to live change all of the presets while I'm playing. And it actually only use the vector for a couple of transpositions during the piece, so I can focus on turning knobs and things. It has pretty good preset support, so you can set up multiple presets. You can chain presets. And also in the piece I have, there's a long solo, and it's actually broken up across 8 different presets that are chained together. Let's see. What else? Steve, help me here.
So that's a good sort of technical overview of some of the things it does. I think what it does for me functionally is it ties together a whole bunch of things in the room I'm sitting in here. The cat occasionally when he gets tangled up, but mostly it's pretty great at sequencing and controlling CV controlled gear or MIDI. I've got MIDI controls out to my Moog and a Korg and an old SH2 over here via CV, obviously. But it sort of brings everything in this room together into a controllable mass via one interface. It also plays really well with a bunch of other sort of clocking and sequencing modules in my setup too. So I'd say it's just a really good heart of a system. It allows you to paint with all the different colors of things you got and integrate all the different gear you've got in a pretty easy to use way, I would imagine. That's what I get from it. It's kind of, you get to compose, jam, and conduct all at once just from the one front panel. I think that's what I'd say.
Dope. Wow, it seems like a pretty powerful sequencer, but yet with a straightforward interface.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that the UI is pretty shallow, so it's easy to find your way around.
Yeah,
and a lot of functions, it's a consistent finger movement to move from one section to the other, so it makes it really easy to go Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to jump to this modulation section. I know I can click here and turn this knob and be there every time. And so there's not a lot of hesitation. Like, okay, how do I get from here to there? It's a very fast UI to use. In fact, I've a few times watched Steve set up demos, and he's just ad hoc demo. And he's just flying through, pressing keys, and even I can't quite keep track of where he's going. And
I think we all use it different ways, and it's kind of interesting. And the same when I've watched Brian, and I'm going to be watching Dysonant closely today too, to see different approaches of things I might be missing. So I'm pretty excited for this. Thanks, guys.
Well,
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy that you guys are here. I think when I first, I don't know if it's exactly the first time I really started to pay attention to the vector sequencer, but Dysonant, you're definitely one of the first people that I watched perform, and I knew that you were using the vector sequencer, and so I'm happy to have you on the show here too with everyone.
Thanks. Yeah, I get along with it really well. I was talking about it today on our Discord for NIMS, and just saying that I think I've had about maybe 10 main sequencers in my Euro travels, and this one I've had the longest. I get along with the best, and is like the most direct brain to music interface that I've had yet, and I really dig it. We're friends. We're good friends. Yeah.
Dope. Well, that says a lot. Right? Because I think a lot of times we all come across a lot of different gear trying to find the right thing, especially in Eurorack. I don't know that I've done that with anything else. I don't think I have gone through a lot of synths, but not for that reason, trying to find the right thing. It's just because, with me, synths are like crayons, right? Like I want to use all the colors, right? But for some reason, when you need something specific in Eurorack, you tend to go through several of whatever that thing is till you find the one that works well for how you work. And that's dope to hear, especially with a sequencer, because there's so many options out there, and those are not just, buy on a whim sort of modules. You know what I mean? And so it's dope to hear that, after going through about 10 other sequences, you landed on this one, and it's been what you've been looking for. That's dope.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you bring up a great point about it is an intensely personal thing, sequencers, I feel like. And an oscillator, sure, you can have feelings about it and like them, but you do want all the crayons in the box. But I think what I like the most about the Vector is that it's kind of gives me the best of both worlds, between when I need it to be extremely precise and I want a note in a specific spot at an exact time. It's very easy to dial that in. But then when I want to do really crazy, like generative or random stuff, there is always a way to do it. So it's also very modular. It has an extremely modular approach to it. And you can do strange things like run 6 lanes of sequences completely unsynced with each other. So it's, which is, I mean, I don't know if you want to do that, but if you did, you can. So.
Right. Yeah, I have to agree with you. And just like the whole layout visually, I'm a very visual person, and also the way I approach performance with my Eurorack is very hands-on. And I like the fact that it's just, you have this immediate, like Jim was saying, like it's just like one button or one knob turn. And the fact that you can see the notes like laid out on your sequence, and yeah, that was super important to me. I have to say, like, too, when I was, learning about the vector sequencer, and this other guy, he was telling me he was, interested. He was going to purchase the vector sequencer as well. And he's like, yeah, it's the guy that wrote that program, that numerology. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Is this going to be super complicated? Like, you know, I too have gone through a ton of sequencers, and I was like, oh, but then the more, like, when I would watch you, all of you at this point now, using the vector sequencer along with some other people that I know that have it, I was like, I gotta get this thing. Like, I have to do it. Like, it just seems like it's really gonna fit for me, and it has. Like, yeah, like, yeah.
It's funny because I think we had this conversation, Shanda, when you were Travasi, when you were working on a few things. I think people like Dysonant and myself probably had the vector back when it was just 8. When I say just, back when it was just 8 monophonic parts, right? So it was before the chord modes, before the drum modes, before all the different timing options and all of the other things that have appeared, all the alternate tunings and all of that. So I've kind of had the luxury of learning it as it came up, which has been great. But it's amazing how much is packed into the box. And the thing is, you don't need to use all of it. You could write really meaningful music just using a couple of the features. And that's the whole thing. I think some people look at a big list of features and say, "Oh, I'm a bit scared of that," right? But the thing is, you do not have to use much of it at all to write some meaningful music. Yeah,
You know what's interesting
That is so
about
true.
when you say that, it is true, but you know what I think also happens is a paradox of things that happens. People know that they only want to do, you know, A, B, and C. But if the thing doesn't do A through Z, then it's almost like, because we're addicted to features nowadays, I think.
yeah.
And, you know,
Right.
how many people really truly dig in and do everything that everything does? But what I wanted to do before we go around, because I realize I sometimes just feel like everybody knows what everybody does, and you know, maybe we should have done a little more of a. I'd like to know, because and I don't know, Jim and Steve, you all work together. Jim, you're 512 Inc., right? Or how's it? Give us a little background of the company.
So I met Steve on Facebook, I think, right? Exchanging some messages, and he offered to start a user group there. The 512 Vector Sequencers group is his creation. And so we started chatting a lot, and I put him on the beta list. So he's always giving me great feedback on new features and things. And, you know, and when we started doing live streams, he's, you know, been around and really a great contributor. And so I definitely consider him to be an extended team member at this point.
Nice.
You know, just always has great ideas, makes great music, is always exercising different features and giving me feedback. And yeah, it's I you know, Steve's wonderful. He's made my life so much easier.
I thought I was making it harder, to be honest. But the way I got into the vector was I was after a sequencer. There weren't so many options 3 years ago, or 2.5, 3 years ago. I knew Jim had a great reputation with numerology, and I thought, oh, okay, that could be interesting. I sent him a couple of emails about, can I have each part with different step lengths? And that's kind of all I was keen on at that point. I wanted to write music where I could have parts with different step lengths. Yes, it can do it. Great, I'll buy one. And then I just started sending him emails saying, hey, what about this? Or what about this? And that's how it kind of happened. So, yeah, it's been great fun. I've learned a lot. So thanks very much, Jim.
Dope. Well, that's good though. You know, I think we spoke about this before on the show, where how what's great about being a small company, and oftentimes Eurorack companies are like one dudes, two dudes, or one dude in a couple of outsourced situations or whatever it is. And a lot of times what that does is it allows us to be closer to the community and allows us to be able to reach out to the community and kind of have your finger on the pulse of what your customers would want. Whereas some of the larger companies, they probably don't have that luxury. And I think it's dope how, you know, it's this sort of circular sort of community thing, that the outreach that goes on, where, you know, the community is reaching out to the guy at the company is reaching out to the guys in the community, and at the end you get this device, whatever it might be, that is like really catering to what the community wants and needs, and the customer base wants and needs. So I always think that's dope. So that's a good
yeah, absolutely. It's, I mean, almost all the manufacturers in Eurorack are approachables one way or another, and and are, always listening to what users have to say. And they can't always do everything, but I think people really do listen and watch the market and see what can help people make better music.
No doubt.
I think you're very responsive too. I mean, that's my personal experience. You're always on the pulse of answering questions, whether it's like the forum or Facebook or emails and things. And you too, Steve. So that's really, for me, that's really important, especially when I'm starting to learn something that's is a little bit more complex.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to know there are people there that can answer your questions and work with you when you run into a problem, and
And just a shout out to, sure, I've given Jim a lot of feedback, but as to have many users who are part of the community or on the internet forum or on the Facebook group. There's a lot of really active music writers and Eurorack people on it, and they've all provided some really useful feedback and so on. I tend to sort of aggregate it and nag Jim a bit, but there's certainly some great stuff that's come from that community engagement too. So, yeah.
Cool. I wanted to ask this question was asked and answered in the chat, but I wanted to bring it up on here because I think it's one of those things. Here it goes. Can you live record non-quantized in the vector?
So not yet. Something I added for 2.0, actually relatively late in this cycle, was grid recording, which is very handy for drums. And of course for sequences where you're like, yeah, I want this locked to whatever grid I've set, 16th note, 8th notes, maybe even double whole notes for people doing ambient stuff. And with the intention of having a non-quantized option available at some point. And had an interesting experience writing music for this. And there was no intention. It was just like I had this interesting bass line jam going on. I'm like, okay, I need another part. So I start noodling around on the Launchpad and through modes. That allows me to play on the Launchpad keyboard and have it come out on a module sound. And came up with what was a pretty, I'm like, okay, I'm digging the solo. And initially thought, okay, I'll just, do a couple takes until I get the right one. And it's like, well, this is actually kind of hard to play when you're trying to keep track of everything else in the piece and basically doing a live mix. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try and sequence it. My first try to sequence it, I wasn't getting what I wanted, and then came back the next day and started changing around playing with step lengths and thinking, just like pulling back a little bit, say, okay, these are the different parts of the solo, and some of it are in a quartal feel, and some of it are in a triplet feel, and some of it has a little bit of a swing to it. And I was like, okay, and I was, Steve, you remember I was talking to you online saying, okay, yeah, this is kind of the goal for a non-quantized recording, is to be able to play something like this and have it come out so that it has that feel, but it can distinguish between, quarter notes and triplet notes and things that are groove based, and split those things up. So I now have like a goal in mind that, like, okay, this is what I want to be able to play and have it record and represent it accurately. It's going to take a little while, but I know that's something that will be useful for me and obviously useful for everybody else.
Yeah, fantastic. I'd be really keen to see that too, because there are some sequences that do it, but very few that do it really well, I think. You could count them on a couple of fingers. So, in my opinion, we're all different. But that's the great...
No, go ahead.
Sorry, but that is the great thing about the Eurorack design and communities. A lot of the manufacturers are players as well, and are actual users as well. And I think you kind of have to be to get the mindset. Sorry, Corey, you go.
No, that's all good. I should have waited for you to finish. But what I was saying is that, to that point, that's one of the reasons I haven't been able to venture too far away from my drum machines and whatever samplers, because Jim, you bring up a good use case for recording unquantized into the sequencer where you're doing improvisational keys riffs and stuff like that. Yeah, that stuff has to be behind the note, in front of the note, between the note, around the note, depending on how jazzy or how freaky you're getting with the playing, right? But also with hip hop and obviously mod bap that I do, you need to be able to record unquantized, because there too you kind of find that spaces between the notes, and there's certain swing patterns that you have to be able to do that just comes natural in how you program, and things like that, late snares and wonky hats and that sort of thing. So that's been a big holdout for me. Typically, if I have a Eurorack sequencer, it's usually for melodic stuff, and all of my drum stuff is coming from whatever I'm using, the Force, an MPC, or S2400, whatever.
Cool.
I think that's a common setup for a lot of folks that are using Eurorack, actually, and a lot of the sequencers, you can only go so far. The format is restrictive in that regard, so you can only fit so much into the right amount of HP to make people happy for the right price. And I'm sure you had a lot of challenges with that, Jim, deciding what features it should have and shouldn't have from a hardware perspective.
Oh yeah. And the initial Vector I showed at NAMM didn't have the USB-A port, different button setup. Quite a few things were different, and I think I kind of got lucky when I did that big redesign right after that, in terms of like, okay, yeah, we definitely want an expander with more I/O. Initially, there was no option for expansion, and that's obviously a big deal. And and adding the USB-A port was specifically like, well, one, the idea is you plug in a cheap keyboard and you can program that way and play, maybe do a playthrough, MIDI through, that sort of thing. And I also knew in the back of my head that it's like, well, you could also plug in a launch pad and use that. And I knew it would take a couple years before I could get it working. And it's been great. It's really expanded the capability from that transition from you're playing around and you're composing to where you're performing and you want to kind of condense your set down. So there is kind of often a pretty long path from, we should add this because we might want to use it later, and also kind of that ongoing balance between, okay, we could add all these things and everybody would love to have them yesterday, but we have to kind of organize things in a logical sequence. And, and there was a lot of changes under the hood with 2.0, just in terms of like making the timing really solid and making everything just kind of work better. And often very small detailed things, like there's a key combination and you can have the sequencer display follow through on a long sequence, like you have a 64-step sequence and it can track through as the sequence plays. You flip that on and off very easily. You can set how the buttons on the encoders work. So now, it used to be they didn't really do much of anything, and now automatically they're used for mutes and unmutes, and that can be adjusted with a preference, because some people want that, some people want them to not do anything. So it's just this kind of slow back and forth between what I'm trying to do code wise, what I'm interested in personally, what the users are interested in, what sort of feedback I'm getting. And that's what's fun about it, is it's kind of this exploration. We have this hardware design and these capabilities we have. It's like, okay, now let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can add. Let's see how we can expand it, and keep making it a more useful tool for composing music.
Now, when you were initially designing this module, did you come across a situation where you maybe, and I don't know, everybody's different, did you kind of dream up the interface in your head and maybe mock it up, and then decide as you were starting to actually design the functionality, like, oh, it needs to be bigger because it needs this?
So I knew from the start I wanted to do something with a short wide display with 8 encoders underneath it. And very quickly having a 9th encoder over to one side to kind of edit other things in a different way. And originally it was going to be a 40 by 2 character LCD display, which is, they work and they're good, but I found some OLED displays, and when I found these, I was like, I put 2 of them side by side, and I'm like, oh, it has to be this. I mean, there was just like, there was no way it was ever going to be, it has to be this. And, at the time I didn't even know how to control those things. And, they use flexes and they connect very tiny little connectors, and I was nervous about that. And then got some samples and played around. I'm like, okay, I can, and that's over a course of like several months figuring that out. And but they're great. I mean, it makes everything so much easier because you can see what's going on. There's lots of room to do graphics and things. And am I pushing the limits of the hardware yet? There's some concern about that, particularly memory. There's something I want to do to kind of reorganize memory to make it so that we can have more room for presets on a part. And a few other things. CPU wise, we're doing okay, but that is a reason why only 4 parts are flippable to chord and drums, is I wanted to make sure that I didn't go completely crazy on it. And kind of like with numerology, where you can have as much of anything as you want. And sometimes it can be a little tricky to like, okay, how do I really stress the system to find the edges? And so with the vector, I said, okay, 4 parts that can be polyphonic, or either chord or drums. And again, with the chord sequence and the drums, you get 4 voices each, and that's to keep the memory under control. There's not a lot of memory, so I have to be careful. Every bit counts. And something people really want are more chance operations, and I'm working out a way to squeeze those in, but I have to keep track of how much memory we're using. So yeah, there's always those trade-offs. In a way, and it's good too, because it kind of keeps you sane, right? On desktop software, there's no limit, so it can be kind of a problem. You start chasing after big dragons and can get into trouble. And
Right.
On the vector, it particularly say, well, people want more chance operations, and right now there's a button for chance. It has 3 pages, and people are asking for more lanes of chance. I'm like, well, I don't know. Having 6 pages in there is not necessarily that great. So it takes a little while to kind of think, okay, how can we do this? And now I'm looking at the ratchet button, which only does ratchets, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, maybe we push ratchets somewhere else, because a lot of people use chance operations when they're doing ratchets, because it's so nice to have them ratchet, not ratchet, ratchet more, ratchet less. And so it's kind of this thing. It's like, okay, how can I do this and make it fit into this hardware UI so that it remains usable? And so you're not getting lost because you're diving deeper and deeper into pages. It has to fit. And again, with any new feature, it's like, how does this fit in this UI? And how do we do that so that it makes sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I just want to check in with everyone in the chat. Just say thank you for being here, and keep dropping your questions in the chat. We'll be sure to pop them up there and get them answered. Right. We have another one up from Balance Spring. Can you see that there? Can you talk?
Yeah. I'd say, I have a key step, and I'd say generally you plug it in and you turn on record mode. And I can flip over to my system real quick if you want, just to show where that page is.
Sure. Please.
And, a normal pitch page, you press record to get to record mode. And the source you'd set for USB-A. In this case, it's my launch pad. But if it's the key step via USB, you'd plug it in there and set that to USB-A. Or if you're going, say MIDI in on the expander, you'd plug in here. You set record mode on, and then you pick which record mode you want to use. And I think, Steve, didn't we cover this in the big 2.0 deep dive? We went through all the record modes.
Yeah, we did. So basically you also, it'll just take in whatever your input is from the USB-A over there, or the jack expander, or the MIDI inputs. So you've got to get that right too. But yeah, it should work pretty well. I would always, on a key step, just make sure you've got it assigned on channel 1 by, I think it's hitting the shift and the low C key.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I was running some tests with that, and that tripped me up. Is you got to make sure it's outputting on channel 1.
Yeah. So that's caught me up in the past. Key steps are great, by the way. But look, as a user, if you're having a problem with that, if you try the things we suggested and you come out not knowing what to do, just get in touch with me. I'm pretty easy to find. I'll help you.
Cool. So, hey, let's get to some videos. With, for those that frequent the show, what we do is, we talk a bit about the gear. Tends to be the dive. Gear obviously is what it is, but then we get into some jams. And so let's start to do that, because I think we have 4 to get through.
Yes.
halfway through the show. So who's first?
Okay, well, let's see. I will play mine first since
What?
I,
I'm
yep.
just kidding. Of course.
Why not? It's like, well, I'll tell you the reason why I want to play it first. I kept it kind of short, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is that there's so many ways that you can use the sequencer, and as we move through the performances, you're going to see people using various launch pads of different sizes, and they're going to start to use the expander. And I thought that it would be a good opportunity to kind of dial back to when I first got the vector sequencer, and I had to just focus on the main meat of it and just kind of learn how to program a sequence. And I thought it would just be kind of fun to illustrate and show how easy it is to just kind of write something on the fly and sort of improvise by using the buttons and knobs. So yeah. So all right, so I will, are you guys ready? I will launch
Yeah.
this
Let's
in.
do this.
I can mute and
All right, everyone kind of mute up
All right.
and
crazy.
That was awesome.
Whoa.
You did not come in to play games, right? You just jump right in there.
It's like super concentrated, short, but packed with everything.
Yeah. And that's totally great demo of jamming on the line while everything's playing and just taking it around and building it up and breaking it down. And
yeah,
it's
I had a lot of fun doing it. Yeah. As if you've watched this show before, everyone knows all the jams we like to, tomorrow, they will all be standalone videos on our Gear Dive Jam channel. I have an extended version. I because I was just like lost in it. So there's like, I'll post that video tomorrow, but it's like basically a 7-minute jam of me just going all over the place, like just
So
turning
this,
the
this
knob and
show
adding notes, improvising, because it's just fun to like, just to be able to like, just immediately start writing the sequence and turning the knobs. And I looked at the time and I was like, oh shit, I better cut it to get my point for the show, like what you can do
So
with
that's
it.
why I
And then
show it
put
like
the
that.
video
This jam was a countermeasure to what you really did. You were already amped up. That's why you came in swinging. You were in that groove already.
Yeah, I was like, that was like the second breakdown of like, yeah, but yeah, super fun, like very performable, and to me, that's like key. That's definitely on the top of my list of any module, is that it has to be able to perform with it easy.
So tell us what you had going on with that patch and how Vector Sequencer kind of played a role in how you patched there.
Sure. So the voices, I had the Odessa on the first Volt per octave slot. And then on the second one, I split it out to the domino and to the BIA. So that rough sound was just the under pattern of the same sequence, but using the BIA, bringing that in and out. And then, just the main voice was the domino, and just like playing with that sequence. And yeah,
Dope.
that's pretty much. And then the drums, where I had like the simulator and the Nord drum too going. But yeah.
Dope.
Cool.
Odessa. You got
Yeah.
Odessa.
Yeah.
We need to do a show on Odessa actually, so we need to plan that.
Odessa.
Oh, and Christy brings a pie.
But yeah, no, it just, super performable. I can't say that enough, really. It's just a lot of fun to just
That's huge.
buttons and tweak those knobs.
I mean, it has a keyboard built into it on top of it. So yeah. it's pretty performable as far as sequencers go.
Yeah.
Oh,
one thing I like to do, which I didn't do
so
in
the
this
buttons are the
sequence.
black knobs, or the black keys, and the white ones are the white keys. Okay.
Yeah. One thing I didn't do too, which I like to do, is when you're on that octave page where I kept changing the octaves, is that you can also just transpose the entire sequence, which I like to do that as well. But I don't know, I was having fun just kind of changing all the specific notes on the fly. Yeah.
Yeah, when I've been recording tutorial videos, and now I'm starting this pattern where I'll do the tutorial video, and usually based on some example, and then I'll record a short jam or a little etude just using what was in the video. And so I've got one up, and it's just playing with skip steps and select and transposing things, and it's just fun, It's just goofing around and exploring.
Yeah. Very cool.
That's dope that it has that sort of appeal and that sort of capability that kind of draws you to dig in and explore and perform that way. We definitely need more of that in Eurorack, especially. You know what I mean? Something that makes you perform and diversify the patches. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's kind of like you get this feedback between the instrument and the performer, right? It talks to you, and you talk to it, and you try things, you ask it questions,
exactly right? It becomes an instrument. Like when you can have that kind of dialogue with what you're playing, it actually is performing like an instrument, right?
And I like that you can see when you can see the notes, the specific note that's playing, and I was sequencing the two voices on just the one pitch, out and gate, but because I was able to see which note I could bring in my BIA on the specific notes that I wanted to emphasize, which is really handy to be able to see that. As
That's
opposed
interesting.
to guessing. I mean, guessing is fun too, but it's nice to be able to know like what's going on in your patch.
I think that comes out really well in your work, Travasi. I think there's always, not always, but there's often a lot going on. I think it's fair to say, especially in that last segment we just saw. But you somehow managed to find space between the lots of things going on for those things to be individually discernible. So yeah, really great
Thank
work.
you. Thank you. Awesome. Should we bring in another video? Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
All
do
right.
it.
Let
Who's
me
next?
just cue that. Want to tell us just like a little brief while I
Well,
bring that
mine's
in?
kind of long and slow, but I think two things to watch for is I've got a 2-voice AJH set up for the bass, and I'm sequencing that actually with chords. So in addition to one oscillator basically as the low note, the other oscillator is usually either 2, 3, or 4 semitones above it. And I play with that a lot through the sequence. And then also auxiliary gear, I'm doing a lot with a coma reactor and a Steiner VCF from Blue Lantern, and using that as a noise, basically a noise instrument, and that comes in and out at various parts. And then there's a long solo that I talked about when we were talking about off-grid recording that I originally had, learned to play and had some very specific rhythms, and ended up sequencing that. And you'll see I'll trigger it on the launch pad, and I just hit. It's on the first part, so it's the leftmost column, and I hit button number 2 to start it, and the playlist takes it through like 8 different presets while it's playing, and that frees my hand so that I can play with the knobs and vibrato and things.
Very cool. All right, let's bring it in.
Let's go.
All right, everyone mute up.
Bing.
Very cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Nice. That was awesome.
Yeah,
I think I'm
that was
still in
great.
the place it took me to. That was wonderful. Yeah.
Some pretty spacey, weird stuff.
It was dope though.
That was so cool.
It definitely, it was mood inducing. You know what I mean? It kind of it took you to a place, like from beginning to end. And
Mhm.
you know, I got to tell you, it's not easy to be as smooth and subtle with those changes and those little things. It's like there was a lot of ear candy in there where things were coming and going. You know what I mean? And transitioned us to different places. Really dope. Really dope.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, it's I'll be working on it some more, and if I can get Chris Meyer out of his endless live streams over here for a jam, I know he's gonna put some awesome drums to go with it. The sparse drum sound is great, but I'm really interested in kind of pursuing that more and doing a few other things with it. But it was a fun track to build.
So
Very cool. Question, was the melodic line, was that what you were referring to?
Yeah. So all that was sequenced across, I think it's 8 presets, maybe 9. And so I'd kind of figured out what the basic bits were. There were kind of like 2 main riffs. And the main riff is this kind of triplet feel, but there's a little bit of a groove to it. So it's just off grid. And then there are a few kind of whittly bits that go along with that. And then the nice thing about sequencing it is I was able to add a long run and a couple of other things that I'd never be able to play, even just, in practice, much less in a performing environment. And then I used the playlist to string it all together. So I set the preset quantization on that part to be on a beat. So I could change at any beat. And each section is usually an odd number of beats, maybe 14 or 15 beats or 9 beats. And then I have the playlist set up just so it plays one, then plays the other, then keeps going through. And then a trick I use a lot, and I did several times in this piece, is the first preset for each part basically just mutes it. It says do nothing. And that way I don't have to flip the Launchpad page from the preset page to somewhere else to mute a part. I can just queue up the first preset and I know it'll stop whatever it's doing. And then for that solo, I hit preset number 2 on the Launchpad, and then it just runs through its thing, and I can start playing with filter cutoff, resonance, and a little vibrato.
nice.
Very cool. I have a question too, and just as a reminder, also, just everyone in the chat, thank you for being here. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in there. And yes, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Thank you for being here. I have a question, Jim, about the scale. So I know you wrote in the chat which scale you were using, but this is so I know when I've noticed that when I choose a different scale, that it changes across the everything. Is that okay? Is that
so? The sequencer doesn't store the absolute notes. It stores the offset from whatever your bass tone is, right? So you say it's E minor, your bass tone is E, but it stores basically a 0 for an E, and for an F, well, let's say like an F sharp, it would store up 2 semitones, a +2, or from E down to a D, it would be a -2. And that means that when you change the key, or you transpose, or you change the scale, then it can be relatively smart about how it maps your old stuff to the new stuff. And it just makes a lot of the internal stuff easier. And so instead of saying like, oh, this was a C and now you're an E, but it's just like, okay, you say that, this is why it's kind of important that you make I don't know, you don't have to make a decision about what key or scale you're in when you're starting, but just, if you're like going, just noodling around, you're like, okay, I like this, but I want to hear it in a different key. You change from, say, C chromatic to like D major or E minor, and it'll move everything to match that key and scale. And it does it in a way that is relatively intelligent about how it gets there.
And the other thing,
but the one thing is that, so when you change a part to a new part, it changes all the parts. That's more so what I was.
yeah.
Is that always like? Is that I'm gonna ask for a feature.
Well, all right. So let me show you. I know Steve wants
So
to.
for example, like I want one part with a different scaling, and then another part I want to keep a different type of scaling. There's
Oh
no
yeah, you
way-
can do that.
Yes.
You can do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay,
like
what am I
here's
doing wrong that it's not?
well, they're in two different spots. All right, and
Okay.
in the main globals page, tempo, swing, sync mode, key, and scale. So this is the global setting, right? And then when you're in a part, all the buttons up here are part specific. So you're always in some certain part when you're paging around here. And you go over to control page, and here's your octave and transposition stuff you're playing with earlier. If you
Right.
page down by one, here's key and scale again, so you can override what the default is.
What about the tuning? Maybe that's what I was. Sorry, I should have.
So the tuning is so it gets a little tricky because some people think alternate scales, and they mean both different notes that are playing, but also a different tuning for those notes. And this is new in 2.0, and it's something that's kind of a little under the radar in terms of big features, because I think a lot of people aren't quite sure what to do with it yet. But you can pick completely different tunings, like say my new favorite is 31 tones per octave, 31 TET, 31 tone equal temperament technically. So you can put something like this on, and now you're completely out of any normal Western tuning.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. I'm sorry, not to be confusing to you and to everyone else out there, but yeah, I meant the tuning. So like if I change the tuning knob and then if I go to a different part, now that other part is now in that same tuning. Is there a way to?
No. Each part has its own tune.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could have one part that's all in the weird stuff, and then you can have, your other parts, say you got your chord parts stay in normal tuning in a scale, and you've got a bass line you want to just be like off kilter, right? So you can push that into a different tuning, and then and leave the others will stay the same.
Is there a way to have it change per part? I mean, not part, but per
preset.
Preset within that same part?
I think it is preset enabled. I have to check.
Because that's where, so I'll
Steve is going to check and let us know.
Okay, because that's I'll change the tuning and the tuning, and then if I jump to another preset, it changed the tuning to that preset.
I'll check. I mean, if it doesn't, that's something that's a legitimate feature request, right? It's just about where it's stored, and but it's a good point, right? Is you found something, it's like, well, that's not quite what I expected. So,
Okay. Well,
let me know.
Add that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, on that note, let's get into another jam.
Awesome. All right. Next up, we have Dysonant. Do you want to give us a little info while I get that queued up here?
Sure. Yeah. I use the drum parts in a probably less traditional way. Since there's 6 tracks, I'm really doing 2 melodic tracks most of the time, and then 4 percussive tracks. 6 tracks that are CV outs, right? And then the 7th and 8th track I will use for a drum part and for chords. The chords are on MIDI. The drum part goes into a switch. All 4 parts of it go into a switch. So I can toggle back and forth between the 4 other CV outs. I don't know if you're following me. It's sort of complicated. But the idea is basically that I'm using the main sequencer and all of its glorious goodness and the ability to do crazy weird timing stuff on a per step basis for a lot of percussion. And I'm doubling up those 4 parts with a 5th part, which is a percussion part. into a switch, so I can swap back and forth between them.
Very cool.
Sounds like dope patching. Dope.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice way
It's
to
interesting.
do ad hoc
Sorry.
fills and just changes on the fly. And
Yeah, it allows me to pick different timings for that's what I'm using the drum parts for the most is fills, actually. So you'll hear a couple of fills and the timing just switches from, you know, I don't know, divided by 16 to eighth note triplets or something like that. Suddenly it'll switch. So you'll see.
Cool.
All right, let's mute up, and I want to hear this. Okay, here we go. So sick.
Oh, that was great,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Yeah, that was gorgeous. Just loved it.
Yeah, beautiful mix. Lots of crazy cool shit going on.
Yeah.
I think Gerald Ford is right, or is it Jord? Anyway, the lack of an identifiable melody makes it so easy to listen to for extended periods of time without it fatiguing the ears. It's interesting, isn't it? So it's a good, yeah.
Totally. Steve, you had a question. Do you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that kick timing in sort of towards the 2/3 to end mark, where it was kind of It sounded irregular, but it seemed to, when it fell, it always seemed to be in the right place. How do you do that without years and years of Zen meditation?
Yeah. There is something that's so fun. That's a total trick on the vector. I'll start with oblique 2, right? And it's just to get me going. There's like these generative sections in the vector where you just click a couple keys and it'll fill out a bunch of data for you. So the oblique one really messes with the timing per step. And I'll just sit there and I'll go through it for a while until I hear something that has an interesting rhythm, but it's wrong, because it's always wrong. Like when you use that, it's, at least in my experience, it's never, oblique is just kind of nuts, and you have to do something to fix it if you're going to use it. So
yeah.
It's a great starting point, and then I will mess with resets and I'll start pulling everything out. I'll listen to it and I'll try to decide, okay, this is where this particular string of notes rhythmically begins. This is the one, right? And I'll use the shift keys to shift that all the way over to the one position. And then I'll use reset to ensure that things sort of start at the same time, and I'll pull notes out of it until I have something that sounds kind of right, you know. And then I might copy that over sometimes to the snare, the hi-hat, and some percussive note, and then add to those and shift them as well, where they start, where their one starts, or maybe I'll change their timing a bit. So, but I love the cool timing features like on this thing. It's crazy. It allows me to do things that have only been in my head until now. So
yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that answer. I'm totally going to rip that off for the rest of the weekend.
Oblique is very messed up. Yeah.
I love it though. It's so insane sounding. If you do it on, like, if you have 6 things hooked up to it and you do oblique on all 6 things.
Especially at a high BPM. When I first tried it, I was like, holy shit. It was like, Jim's like, slow it down.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I meant for it to be used at slower, quarter note rates or slower, but it's like whatever works, right?
Yeah.
We should just rename it to Dysonant mode, I think.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, just because I don't have one and I'm curious about how it handles drums. You said there's a drum track, a drum mode on it.
Yeah. So there is a drum mode, which I'll let Steve and Jim speak to it, but I'll tell you real quick from my perspective. It has 4 parts, and it is more traditional, like it's on the grid, and you can't do separate timings for each of those 4 parts. So like you can't have, at least not yet, I don't think you can have like 12 steps on one of them, or maybe you can now. Can you do that now?
So how it works, you've got there's a mode called drum part mode. Yeah, and you're quite correct, Dysonant. Each drum part can have 4 drum voices in it, so you can have kick, snare, hi-hat, whatever, clap. But they are all linked to the same rhythmic timing and length. So you're quite right. So if you wanted to do a separated thing like what you've done, you'd have to create multiple drum parts, which in the scenario you're in would defeat the purpose, because you've got sort of monophonic sounds that you're playing per rhythmic layer, I think.
That's primarily what I'm doing. I'm using monophonic parts, all of the CV outputs, the pitch and the regular CV output on each of the parts. And but then I do use the drum part on one of the parts, which is really I use it mostly for fills, and it's nice to draw everything back in. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, how are you using it for fills? Just out of like, we've been talking about fills.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. So I will set it so that it like I said, it comes out on the jack expander. There's 8 gate outputs.
Right.
And if you set up a drum part, I set mine up on track 7 always, right? That's just what I do. And I assign it to come out of 4 of those 8 gates outputs. So each one's its own drum, and then those go into this switch that I was talking about. It's a discontinued noise engineering module. So the Confundo Funkitis.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's like my favorite thing in the world. I love that thing.
That's a dope one. Okay.
Yeah. But that allows me to just slide from the 4 monophonic parts, which is my main drum beat, over to this 1 part 7, which is 4 gates on a single part that are timed. And then the fills, I mean, I'll cut everything out and just do like all 8th notes in triplet. All hi-hats on every single beat in triplet timing or something weird, something different from what I'm doing regularly. So
you're feeding it into the, I see. Okay. I see what you mean. Cause I tried, I figured out how I could do fills by using the WMD, that SL3KT. Sorry,
that's the one. Yes,
yes, and I patched the drums in there, and then on the other side, the planar 2, and so then I would swing the little joystick, and that would sense. Create a fill in between, So that was fun too. Yeah,
totally makes sense. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, no, these are fully programmed fills, but it does allow a performative quality with the switch because I'm not slaved to the sequencer to switch in those fills. I can do it whenever my fingers feel like doing it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I stole Shanda's idea actually because I thought it was amazing. I got the select as well. But I stuck a Euclidean module in with programmed beats and then used CV to modulate between the Euclidean thing for a fill and then back to the vector for the primary beat. And that I found out actually with the select, you can actually modulate per part as well. So you can have each one modulating between either of those sources A and B. And that just got really wacky. It was fantastic.
Oh, that's cool.
Very cool.
See, what you're doing from an automation perspective brings up this request idea that I have, Jim. So
question without notice.
Yeah.
Just a notepad out.
Yeah. I am I would really love a gate out when you switch scenes in the playlist. And and the reason for that is to trigger other things when you're going from one scene to the next. So like if you have something going on for a while and it's your bit and you're doing it and you're improvising and you're having fun, when you switch, it fires a gate so that timed with that switch to a totally different part, you can do a whole bunch of other stuff. So like swap in a select the way that Steve Turner was talking, or I've got the maze, which is a matrix sequential switch. And I'd love to be able to like step that to a new layout. That would be amazing.
That makes a lot of sense because that allows, it's another way to integrate the rest of your system so it works together, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Or even you could use that to self-patch back into the vector again.
I was thinking about that too.
Yeah.
I was thinking about rhythmic feedback, like gate-based feedback patching in the vector. using the STNs on the triggers, so that you can step each note, and you can create weird, like, generative stuff probably.
Oh yeah.
So many
Yep.
so many cool things.
Yeah. So Corey, just to kind of get back to your original question, is that the drum parts are of 4 voices,
Mhm.
and when you're
Sorry. Tangent.
bring it all, is you have a lot of options in terms of how you organize it and how crazy you want to get, and you can, it's actually a lot of fun to put different parts, different drum hits on different parts and sequence them independently.
Mhm.
And then sometimes it's handy to have, bass, snare, and hats all together, locked together, and keep them that way. And usually, what I do, and I know Steve does this a lot, is you'll spread your drums across 2 or 3 parts. So you have one part in drum mode that's kind of like your main groove, and then you have the crazy shit you can spread across other parts.
Mhm.
And what Dysonant is kind of taking it even further. So just the fills are locked up, and all of the main drum sequencing is crazy and going all over the place.
Okay.
So you just have a lot of
Okay.
One other thing too, Corey, you can do is on this step, you can delay or push that step forward. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on the grid.
So you have gate delays there, so that's always the good workaround.
Yeah, you can micro time the steps forward or backward.
Okay.
And
yeah.
And for serious off-grid work, there are some alternate timing modes that are just pretty insane, actually. And so you have, again, a lot of flexibility. Like, okay, I just want to dial in a little bit of a groove on these steps. Or you can go for a more abstracted thing where you're like, no, I really want the hats to be in a completely different time signature.
All the phase-based stuff too is so cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Dope. Okay, so we should probably.
Steve, are we ready?
Right?
Say
Sounds
again,
good.
Corey? Yep, Steve, you're okay. Give us some info, Steve, while I queue up your video here.
Groovy. Yeah, so look, this one's a bit more of a standard one compared to the last couple, which I do actually use the drum parts pretty extensively. And this, I didn't go crazy with it. I just used them as a bit of a rhythmic plot pusher, I guess. The whole basis of the piece was a chord part, a custom chord part, where I use 2 voices from a chord part going to my troika. I'm using two VCOs from the troika for the pitch material. You'll hear the first melody line come in, and then a second one to sort of counter it. And the rest of it kind of just came about as a quick jam that I did. And then I just got more organized in the way I was delivering it, if you know what I mean. So I came up with the chord part, jammed in the drum part, and then came up with the melody part. And what you'll see me doing in real time is changing the length of the melody part and also the octave transposition. And that's going into a mimeophone for delay. So it gets quite messy at times as far as the notes on top of each other. But I just like doing that. It makes me happy. So I thought, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm just going to have some fun. So the mix is a little bit up and down here and there, but I think you'll see the vector pretty up close as far as what I'm modifying and when I'm doing it. Yes, there's also a BIA sound coming in, but that was a Euclidean pattern that I'd clocked to the vector and then a modulator into the Euclidean module so that it was always changing, which I liked doing. But the pitch of the BIA was coming from the vector. So I had a stable pitch of 7 steps and then the Euclidean very strange, the timing changing consistently throughout, but always the pitch being the same 7-step cycle, which using odd numbers like that against even numbers, it makes it a bit more interesting, but in some way subconsciously predictable. So yeah, that's enough of that.
Cool. All right, well then let's hear it.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, everyone mute up. Nice.
Super dope.
Yeah.
Yo,
Yeah,
that was a vibe, bro.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's just a lot of fun. As I said, it's sort of I'd written something else which I was less happy with, and then I was just having a jam, and I thought, hey, this is coming up. I think I can get a vibe, a feeling, if you know what I mean, and just and move with it. And that's what I found really appealing about Eurorack. I was a guitarist for many, many years, and what appeals to me about a guitar is you can just pick it up and start playing something for as long as you want and stop whenever you want. And I think Eurorack's kind of like that too. You know, you can just sort of jam it, and it's good fun. There's a couple interesting things I did. Someone said, yeah, so my expander's up in the top left, I think Jim pointed out. But I do something a little bit different with the chord mode. I've got the MIDI out coming via a TRS cable, a little 3.5 from MIDI 1. I take that through to a Yarns clone, and that then splits out my polyphonic notes to separate CV pitch outputs. It just means that my rack stays a lot neater. and also for chord parts, there's really no reason not to do that. The only time I've come a cropper with that is when I've wanted to then use a pitch output to influence, say, a VCF volt per octave input, but then I could just route that a different way. But I just find that's a really neat way of doing things. And Jim was good enough to put in a chord spread mode into the Vector, which was a feature request I made for exactly solving this problem. So it's just, you know, how good it's been working with 512 and with Jim, just getting things done to help compositional goals. And it's like, that's kind of, you can have a feature list, which I think is what Corey was talking about before, but unless you're actually trying to create a melody or a phrase or a rhythm that uses any of those features, you know, it's a theoretical thing, and they're fun too. And I love just playing around with that. But if I'm trying to write a piece of music, there's got to be a function for that feature. So that's been good. But yeah, the mimeophone is a thing I've played around a bit there too with. So when I'm doing the octave shifts and the transpositions, that's sort of harmonizing against itself. And when I was doing the practice jams, I sort of worked out which intervals sounded good to crash up against each other. Some more melodic than others. Sometimes you want to use, you know, a semitone apart from each other just because it sounds good when the delay trails do their thing into the distance. But yeah, that was a good fun piece. So more of a standard drum approach there, Corey. I think that was sort of drum parts in there, straight ahead kind of thing going on, with a pitched BIA, as someone pointed out. But yeah.
Did you end up using any sub-sequencing? I feel like we haven't really touched on that at all.
Yeah, no, it's funny I didn't, because I could have done a lot of the transposition and octave shifts via the sub-sequencing, but I also like just getting hands-on and then listening to it and go, right, turn the delay up now, because I just did something I think sounded all right, so get that delay trail going. And it's, yes, I could have done some of that modulation using the sub-sequencing, and for anyone who doesn't know, sub-sequencing is part of a preset or a sequence where you can say, right, on each of these divided time steps, I want to do a different thing, like change pitch or direct, different things you can do. So, yeah, good fun. You're muted, Shanda.
I just said, yeah, there's just so much. Like, you can do so much.
Very dope. Yo, I think everybody did really dope sets. And the cool thing about Gear Dive Jam is that there's always, no one ever does the thing that the last person did.
Yeah.
And that's what's dope about it. That, you talk about one gear, you get a lot of tips and tricks and kind of deep dives on the thing. And then everybody shows music that the next one wouldn't have thought of doing. So that's dope. I appreciate you guys for coming on and sharing that stuff. Definitely.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, that's the
Thank
fun.
you.
That's the fun of this show, you know, being able to see all these different perspectives and hear the other perspectives. Yeah.
Well, we all learn from each other. I mean, I mentioned I'd stolen an idea from Travasi earlier, and I'm about to steal one of Dysonant, so it's fantastic. They'll be coming to one of my demos soon. So
I'm gonna try that one too, Dysonant.
Nice.
And I'm gonna be trying to find a Confunctus, whatever the hell.
Confundus funkitis. Yeah.
I'm looking for a used one now. I saw somebody in the chat say everyone at NIMS has a that thing because of Dysonant.
They do. I think Analog Haven had like a surplus of them for a while.
I just checked. I'll find one. I'll find one. Even if I got to hit up Chris and say, I know you got an old raggedy one laying around there somewhere that you can sell. But hey, I really enjoyed all of you guys coming by. And Jim, thanks for making such a dope sequencer, and
Yes.
it's really cool.
Yeah, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the duration. You're like nonstop digging in and updating and working with the community. So big shout out to you for putting together such a dope device and dope sequencer, and then still plugging away at it even after it's been in the market for a little bit. So dope stuff, man. Really dope.
Yeah.
And for the people in the chat,
Jim, are you muted? You're muted.
Share the show, like the show, subscribe to the channel, because we're building this up and we want to do many more of these. This year has been an interesting year for us because when we started this, we wanted to be like a circus, roaming around, meeting people and talking to them about stuff and then trying it out. And we'll get there, but we're not there yet. We love that all of you have supported us in doing this show the way we're doing it. And thanks for coming by, and make sure to spread the love and share it. And we'll be back to do more.
Yes.
Marcy, what you got for the people on the way out?
No, that's it. You said it. You said it beautifully. Thank you. You know what? I do have something to say. The Synth Summit.
Yes.
We have the SoCal Synth Summit teaming up with Colorado, and lots of great panels and performances. And that's May 21st through the 23rd. So hopefully we'll see all of you that are in the chat over there as well. And so lots of, that's it. Well, that's a biggie, but that's it.
That's a huge one. I want to make sure that people get that. So I'm going to do this.
Yeah, let's get a link.
Great.
Yes.
This is the Synth Society Summit. And this is our second annual Synth Society Summit, where we get with all the other Synth Societies, SoCal Synth Society and the Colorado Modular Synth Society here. And so it's going to be on May 22nd on Saturday from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific, and May 23rd, Sunday, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific. And here's a list of the things that'll be there. 12 p.m. we have DIY and soldering with friends. 1 p.m. we have hybrid Eurorack systems. At 2 p.m. we have anything, any synth thing but Eurorack exclamation. That should be fun. At 3 p.m. there's going to be a small systems discussion. At 4 p.m. there's a frequency shift. Shifting the paradigm in electronic music, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with that because there's been quite a few of those shows that have gone on, and we love this focus on that sort of space in rack music and electronic music. Then at 5 p.m. My focus, the ModBap session, and we have a lot of fun folks on that piece. And then on Sunday the list goes like 11 a.m. virtual synthesis, 12 p.m. Buchla, 5U, Surge, Oh My, 2 p.m. manufacturers and synthesis driving education and diversity at 3 p.m. Well, that's another favorite of mine, just because I think that there's something really dope that's brewing right there. So there's a lot of good subjects here. And at 3 p.m. there's modular sequencers. Hey, what do you know? Modular sequencers. What a thing. And 4 p.m.
Totally.
Interesting. The byline there is the quest continues, and I think we kind of touched some of that earlier in the show, right? 4 p.m. there's going to be video synthesis, so it's a really well-rounded show. Shout out to all of my people in SoCal Synth Society and all of my people in Colorado Modular Synth Society for putting this together. And it's going to be a fun weekend, and guess what? You don't have to pay, because that's how we get down.
Yep. And just the flyer, Friday night, we're kicking it off with a bunch of performances on the SoCal YouTube channel. It's just performances. And then also, Corey, just to let everyone know too, at the beginning of each panel, there's a short performance. So lots of good things happening that weekend. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah,
yes.
It's going to be fun. So be sure to check that out. And also, I just want to plug a thing. I put together this mod bap compilation with a lot of really dope folks in the community, and it's 20 songs and like 18 producers that are killing the mod bap situation. And it's going to be a double LP that's still in manufacturing and pressing at the moment. And if you want to cop that, it's going to be a double LP limited white vinyl. So go to beatpeople.com and search up, even if you go to beatpeople.bandcamp.com, you can hear it because it's digital there. The album is called Digging in the Wires. And if you want the vinyl, you have to go to beatpeople.com. And when you get to beatpeople.com, that's beatpeople.com. When you get there, you're going to see a banner, so you'll know where to find it. And so, be sure to support. We want to be able to bring more fresh stuff like these shows and that summit and that record, because there's going to be so much more. So thanks for stopping by. I'll stop rambling now, and we'll be out.
Good.
Everybody.